Iran and Israel tensions continue to escalate. Let's get to first the latest developments as of now that we're just getting in. In its latest strikes in Tehran, Israel has struck the Iranian Defense Ministry headquarters. IDF says it has also completed an extensive series of strikes in Tehran related to the Iranian regime's nuclear weapons project. In a tweet, the IDF said the sites it has targeted included the Iranian Ministry of Defense headquarters, the headquarters of the SPND nuclear project, and additional targets, which it said advance the Iranian regime's efforts to obtain a nuclear weapon and where the Iranian regime hid its nuclear archive. In Israel, sirens and explosions have been heard in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv as Iran announced a fresh missile salvo against Israel. Israel's military confirmed the development in a post on X. It said that millions of Israelis were running for shelter as sirens sound in dozens of cities and communities around the country. All right, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Dr. Malcolm Davis live. He is a senior analyst in defense strategy and a military expert. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's get into the details now. Iran has unleashed salvos of missiles towards Israel, which in a first penetrated deep parts of central Israel. Israeli military on its side has said that it has struck Iran's defense ministry headquarters and nuclear weapons project infrastructure. How do you see things panning out from here?
Look, I think this will go on for some days. I think it's very clear that the Israelis are really inflicting significant damage on Iran's military infrastructure. Clearly, they've taken out substantial aspects of Iran's nuclear weapons projects, and they've killed significant numbers of Iran's top military leaders. Iran, in retaliation, is now starting to strike at Israel with significant numbers of ballistic missiles, some of which are getting through because they're increasing the number of missiles being launched. So I think that this is going to continue on. I'm not seeing any indications of either side seeking an off-ramp, and I think that we should basically continue to watch this as it evolves and develops and see where both sides can ultimately take this conflict.
Right, and how do you see or assess Israel's nuclear weapons project infrastructure sites attack? And do you think Israel is capable of striking some underground nuclear facilities as it is adamant to do so?
Look, I think what you're referring to there is the Fordo facility, which is hardened and deeply buried. Israel struck the Natanz facility, which was only about 20 to 30 feet underground, and did significant damage to that. Fordo, by contrast, is 500 feet below ground, and it's hardened and deeply buried. So I think that Israel is going to be challenged to attack that facility, but it's vital that they do, because if they don't, then Iran can reconstitute its uranium enrichment capabilities fairly quickly. So Israel, either alone or potentially with the United States, has to find a way to take out Fordo. But in terms of the other nuclear facilities, Israel is doing quite effectively against those nuclear facilities, and I think it's significantly retarding Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran was very close to having enough fissile material for up to 10 nuclear weapons. I think as a result of Israel's strikes, they're probably set back years.
Right. Now, Iran has so far denied that it's using and just has said that it's using the nuclear facilities for civilian purposes. Now it has also denied the talks. So now that the deal is, we're not saying the deal is off, but the talks are off on nuclear talks. Do you think Iran will still want to go back to its nuclear efforts? And if so, what does it mean for U.S.?
Look, I think that I wouldn't see any real prospect for meaningful negotiations occurring as a result of these military exchanges. I think the Iranians made it clear in the lead up to this outbreak of fighting that they were not prepared to accept a nuclear deal offered by the Americans that would have required them to give up enrichment. Enrichment of uranium is the pathway for Iran to get nuclear weapons. The Iranians have made it very clear they're not prepared to give up enrichment, and that's the reason why the Israelis launched their attacks, because they could see that diplomacy was not really going anywhere. So now that you actually have these attacks ongoing and real damage being done to the Iranian nuclear infrastructure, I think the prospect of Iran going back to the talks and accepting an American deal that basically says no enrichment is even less. So I think that we're probably back into a situation where Iran will try to rebuild its capabilities, but Israel will not let them. Israel in no way is going to allow Iran to get nuclear weapons.
And that being said, how long, or how do you assess how long can Israel actually go ahead with this? Because it's already been fighting for the past 3 years against Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, even still now they're continuing with the operation in Gaza. How capable do you think Israel is to prolong this conflict with Iran, a new front?
Look, I think they're very capable because, for years they have regarded Iran as their primary threat. And so they've been planning in terms of their build-up of military capabilities and stockpiles of munitions and missiles and so forth with that conflict in mind. And so here we are at that actual conflict. And I think that Israel is very well placed to continue to attack Iranian targets across the length and breadth of Iran. I think the key uncertainty is whether Israel will create the conditions whereby regime change could happen. There have already been reports about a senior Iranian leadership and their families fleeing to Russia. That suggests the regime in Tehran is quite weak now. And it's possible that you could see this conflict come to an end, not necessarily because Israel wins it militarily, but because the Iranian people rise up and remove the regime. And I think that Israel would be quite happy with that outcome and would be more than happy at that point to stop the war.
And also, if this conflict does go on, Tehran has threatened to strike U.S. military bases in West Asia. Will the U.S. now be able to keep away from getting involved in a situation like this?
Look, if Iran is foolish enough to strike at U.S. bases or U.S. forces, then the answer is absolutely not. That will drag the Americans in very quickly. The Americans are not going to accept attacks on their forces or their bases and do nothing. They would come in very quickly on the offense. At the moment, the US is involved in the defense in the sense of it's helping Israel defend itself against Iranian missile attacks. But if US forces are attacked, then I think that you will see the US come in offensively and start attacking Iran directly. And the damage that Israel is doing to Iran is significant. The damage that the United States could do to Iran would be far worse. And so I think it probably would not be a sensible move for the Iranian regime to attack US forces.
Right. And also these conflicts, do you think it has the potential to grow out further, or do you think that it might not grow as in the region and it would just stay within Iran and Israel as of now?
Look, I think there's already indications that Iran is looking at potentially options to escalate this horizontally, as basically to spread it geographically. One of the things that the Iranians have been thinking about, I think, based on sort of reporting, is that closing the Strait of Hormuz and thus cutting off the world's oil supply. That would probably bring the Americans in by itself. It also has large numbers of proxy forces across the region, and more beyond that, they control terrorist groups around the world. So Iran, if it wanted to, if it felt that it was losing the war, it had nothing to lose, then it could strike back that way, essentially asymmetrically and indirectly, by using proxy forces and terrorist organizations to attack not only Israel, but also attack US interests across the globe. So there is a possibility that it could escalate horizontally and spread geographically. And I think that once again, the ball is in Iran's court. If it chooses to do that, then essentially it will be the end of the regime, because the Americans would come in very quickly, and that would be that.
All right, talking about U.S. now, Trump administration and Trump himself has said that he's leaving the door open for talks. Do you think there is any possibility for a diplomatic talks for Israel and Iran to come on the table, perhaps bringing Iran on the table for nuclear talks with U.S.?
I am not confident on that for the simple reason that Iran is determined to retain enrichment. And the Americans and the Israelis quite rightly say enrichment is the Iranian path to nuclear weapons. So enrichment is off the table for them. If the Americans and the Israelis say no enrichment and the Iranians say we must have enrichment, then I'm not seeing any viable diplomatic off-ramp here. Even with this conflict going on, I think that for the Iranians to come in to a diplomatic negotiation and essentially accept an American deal that includes no enrichment, you would see probably opposition within Iran to the regime from extremist groups like IRGC and so forth that would potentially threaten the rule of the senior Iranian leadership. So I'm not confident that there will be some sort of diplomatic off-ramp. There might be a meeting, but I don't really think it's going to achieve much.
All right. Well, of course, we'll have to leave it at that. But thank you so much for joining us on the show and giving your insights to us.
Thank you.